Hi guys, so today a mini intro to data types. We won't be going into a lot of details for now. I just need you to understand the concept. So it's a very important element in every programming language and also in JS. So just before we start, I'm going to show you I've created a folder in my theory.js. It's called data types, and inside data types, I've got index.html and main.js. And if you have a look in my index.html, it's very short, easy to read, headings, and here, bear in mind and pay attention that it's like last time I'm going to talk about it, promise. My script, I'm attaching my JS to index.html so that it makes it possible for everything that I'm going to type on main.js to be visible in our browser, in the console. And few styles added just for the purpose of making it a little bit prettier. Cool, so right before the body closing tag, script, I've got all in one folder, so the path is not very complicated. It's just main.js. And to go live, press go live at the bottom, and it's going to open the browser. Cool. So, what do we have in here? We have in JS, depending on the source, but let's say there are 8 built-in types, 7 of which are primitive data types, simple data types, and 1 reference data type, also called objects. Simple types, string is like a text, number, self-explanatory, boolean is like a flag, so it only takes 2 values. It's either true or it's false. Undefined, when something isn't defined. Null is like nothing, literally like nothing. Symbol and big int will not be discussed in this course here, but like big int, if you go into banking and you're going to operate on like huge numbers, you will have to learn about big int. Until then, not necessarily, and same goes for symbol. These are a little bit more complex and not needed at this point. So reference types, also objects. These are objects, however it sounds, functions, arrays. Also, you can create your own object, but this is going to be all discussed later on. And yeah, we'll go into a lot more detail about the string, number, and boolean in this course. So what is type? Type is a common thing in every programming language, but they're slightly different. So if you would, for instance, take some objects from your room, like a painting, a wardrobe, sofa, and you try to categorize it, then depending on the purpose it serves or what it does or how it behaves, then you could put it in a different box. And the same goes for the data that we use while programming. So a different thing you can do with a number, and a different thing you can use a text for. So depending on what purpose it serves, or what it does, or how it behaves in the program, then that's how it's categorized and given its data type. So for instance, 100 in quotation marks and 100 without it is a completely different thing. So this is a string and this is a number. True and true in commas and without it, completely different thing. This is a string and this is a boolean. And it does completely different things. To kind of present the topic, I'm going to use the operator of a type of. And the type of kind of just gives the information of what is the type of the data. So another operator would be this plus here, and sometimes it can be it's always adding something. Sometimes it can add numbers. If you give it if it's 2 and 2, it's just going to add 2 and 2, so it's going to give 4 here. Right, it's 4, but if you do 2 plus 2, but in the quotation marks, it's going to be 22 because it's going to concatenate those two. So this operator, like JS, is clever. So even though it's the same thing, plus and plus, it knows what to do with the data that it receives. So it behaves differently, and it kind of is a different operator depending on the data type that it receives. But type of only returns the info regarding the type. So first things first, string of characters. How do we create a string? A few different ways that we can create a string using double quotation marks or single, just to make sure that you know what I'm talking about. Let's paste it in here. Go type of text, string. Type of this number that is in the single quotation marks, also a string. So type of returning is returning this information about what we are dealing with, and it always takes the form of a string itself, right? Because it's in quotation marks. Another way of creating a string is the use of backticks, and the backticks also have like a superpower, different thing that you can use it for. I will show you when we talk about string in more detail. Another way to create a string. So when we talk about variables, you will find out what I'm doing here, but pretty basic is like I want to create a variable using a keyword let. I want to name it a username, and I'm assigning it a value of a string Marcus. And then if I'm gonna try console logging it, it's gonna show me that this is a string. Cool. Numbers, and like in many other languages, in JS we only have a type number. So no difference whether it is a decimal or it's a full number, it's gonna be a number. In other programming languages, we use integers, float, decimal. So for instance, there could be a possibility of like, for instance, we would say always a let my age and give it a number, for instance. But in other programming languages, it could be a int, short for integer, right? Because it's a full number. But in JS, we don't need to specify. It doesn't need to be specified. It's always created like any other variable. So if you want to create a fraction, put a dot, not a comma, and it's always a number. So there's no difference between integers, float, or a decimal. There are many different ways to create numbers. So for instance, this is a scientific notation for very huge numbers, like extremely extra large numbers, are extremely teeny numbers. And this one is an interesting one because it's a none stands for not a number, and because JS is not stupid. So for instance, if you try, here is an example, 2.2 times a, JS can see that we're trying to do something with a number, but this is not really something that you can operate on a with a number. So it says like it's kind of a number, but it's not a number. So it's like if you made a mistake in your program, it will throw an error and it will give you, this is not a number, you're trying to do something in here. Like for instance, 300 divided by a banana, it'll give you not a number. Because it's like, listen mate, this isn't working. Cool. Got Boolean value. Again, this is only either true or false. So I copy paste in here. It says Boolean. If I put false, Boolean. So it's Boolean type true or false. Look in here. 2 is 2 equal to 3. This is an operator, and we are trying to compare those two values. The result of this operation is going to be either true or false. So if I try to get a result or return what's a type of this, it's going to return Boolean as well. Because it's going to see, oh, this isn't true, this is false, type of false, Boolean. And actually it's quite common to use this to kind of like use in conditions. So it's not that uncommon. Another type, undefined. This is most often created by a program and not the programmer. So just to be sure, type of undefined gives undefined. And for instance, if you create a program that there is a variable that it creates a date of a first login, and the user registered but never logged in to his or her account yet, it's possible scenario, then it's going to automatically get a value of undefined because it hasn't been defined. It has been created, it hasn't been defined yet. Check in the program, in the console. It's undefined. It exists, but we do not know the value of it just yet. And now is actually most often given by the developer. So if I've created a program, and for now, not everyone has a second name. So I'm going to put a null, so it has no value unless it is given by the user, for instance. Just a scenario that it could be used by you while creating a program. Or you could give it an empty string, but it also depends on you. Whatever you find is going to be most useful in your program, because it can depend what is the result you want to achieve. One surprising thing though is, what's a type of null? It is an object. And some may laugh, some may say it's stupid. It's just an error. And nobody's perfect. JavaScript has also its mistakes. And you may wonder why won't they just change it if everyone knows it's a mistake? Well, because JS is a backward compatible language, and so if you have like thousands of programs written already basing on that concept that null is a type of object, then it would require like a lot of backward going to change it all. So kind of, you just need to make peace with that and learn to love it and accept it just the way it is. Let's clear the console. Another one symbol. We won't be discussing it, but let's just make sure that you understand that it is one of the types. And now, the primitive data types that are quite easy to understand, easy to grasp. You have a string. It can be also an empty string, nothing inside, but it's still a string because it's created with the quotation marks. Number is a number. You're adding numbers, you divide them, you multiply, and etc., etc. So you have a thing that you create, and it's easy to understand. Object, on the other hand, a little bit more complicated. And why are they called reference data types? This I'm going to show you right now. So for instance, if I've got a variable called primitive type 1 and it has a value of 20, and now I'm creating another variable that is called primitive type 2, and I'm assigning it a value of primitive type 1. So in this line 59, what I'm doing is I'm creating a totally new variable, and I'm giving it the value that the variable primitive type 1 has at this very point. So it's as if I was just saying I want to have a value of 20. So this is 20. Primitive type 1 to 20. Right. And now if I want to change the value of that primitive type 1 variable, the first one, it had its value of 20, and now I want to give it a value of 30. What should happen to the value of primitive type 2? Should it change at the same time? No, it should not change. Now it's console logging the string. So I'm just going to comment this out. Okay. So here I'm console logging now the value of primitive type 2, and it's given me a value of 20. Why is that? It's because the copy is made, but it's only copying the value. So it's given the value of that other variable to my new variable. And these are like separate entities. They separate their ways. So I'm just kind of like saying instead of 20, give it a value of whatever is underneath this variable here. Cool. And then if primitive type 1, this variable wants to move on with its life and change its value, it's going to change its value, but it's not going to change the value of this other one, because at this point it was 20, and now primitive type 2 remains exactly as it has been at this point when I've created it. Get it? A copy is made, the value is identical, but it's not the same thing. It's a perfect copy value, but already a separate value. just read the comment and try to really understand it, because it's gonna be important discussing this reference data type. Here I'm creating another variable, but as you can see, if you remember from the previous tutorial, this is an array. So this is an object. It's a little bit more complex data type. And then I'm creating a reference value 2, and I'm giving a value of reference value 1. But this is not the same thing that happened above with the simple data type, because this is only copying a reference. So at this point, when I'm creating this variable, it's gonna take the same value. So it's 1, 2, 3. It's console log reference value 1. Okay, let's just finish the topic first. So the reference value 1, this is the form of like adding another element to my array. So as a third element, I want to add 4, and then to my reference value 2, I'm adding another element and 4th position, and I'm giving it a value of 10. And both of those variables are pointing to the same thing. So reference value 1 and reference value 2 only are storing an information about the address in the memory of the program where it's stored. So they are not like, they are only pointing at the actual box in the program where this value is stored. So, and they are pointing at the same thing. So reference value 1 and reference value 2 are pointing at the same thing. So if I'm going to alter one, the other one will change. And if I'm going to alter it from here, it's also going to change. So now that I've put in here, reference value 1 is going to print out all those elements, even those that are added into this other array, because it's the same array. And the reference value 2 is going to print out the same thing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 10. The object was not copied and only a link to the memory location was assigned. I hope you understand the concept. And the next thing that we're going to talk about is going to be variables.